Matt, a little bit of news before we get into what we're going to talk about. There's really not much to say here, but just thought I'd mention it. Weird rumor here, according to DigiTimes, at this spring event, Apple is going to launch an M2 MacBook Pro. And the idea here is that they're just going to replace the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the Touch Bar one, sort of the base model, with an M2 processor, and that's it. No mini LED, no chassis change, just an M2. Am I the only one that thinks that's weird, since we heard the M2 is getting delayed, and with the MacBook Air and the iPad Pro and the other M2 stuff coming later this year, why would we see this sort of new chip launch in this like weird new sort of laptop to little fanfare, unless, I guess, if they did the M2 in the MacBook Air or not the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini, that would kind of make sense. But I don't know, just weird last minute rumor that I kind of has got me scratching my head a bit.
Yeah, it's strange because, I mean, this is almost similar to when they released the iPad Air with the A15 chip in it, and everyone's like, "Whoa, they've never done that before." And it ended up not, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not a big deal, but it's just for the M2, it's interesting because, like, this is the sequel to the craziness and like everything that we were hyped about for the M1 that ended up being great and everyone loves. And then you would expect that Apple would want to make it like a big deal, like here's the second generation of that, but then like we're putting it in a MacBook Pro that is already on its way out. It's strange. I mean, I don't see it not happening, but I guess the reason why it's so weird to me is because if they do announce the M2 chip, I would expect that they're going to want to demo what it can do, right? So why demo it on this old, quote unquote, old looking computer instead of waiting for like the MacBook Air or something? I guess the other way to think of it is, though, maybe they can't wait. Like maybe the MacBook Air is delayed for many other reasons. Maybe the iPad Pro is, kind of lame. So maybe they'd rather just let's launch the chip. Maybe they do put it in a Mac Mini. I think that makes more sense. And then also, silently talk about the MacBook Pro. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even really mention the MacBook Pro and then kind of focus it on like the Mac Mini or something.
Exactly.
I guess we haven't heard any rumors of this, but do you think they would like do a spec bump to the iMac that we have now?
I mean, that makes logical sense, right?
At some point they will.
Even if they don't mention it, I think that I could totally see a world where they don't mention it, but just on the website after the event, whenever the M2 launches, iMac now has M2. That just no price change, no fanfare. That's just what it is. That makes sense, and I guess that's a good question because we've not gone through that yet with Apple Silicon. What is the update process going to be like when Apple releases a new chip? Are only the new computers going forward going to get that chip, or are the still modern chips or computers like the iMac, do those get updates too? It's a great question we don't know the answer to yet.
Yeah, and I mean, we heard that they're on this like 18-month timetable for updating their computers, or I guess their chips, which is kind of, that's in the right space. So maybe they're just like, the M2 is here. I mean, one way to look at it is maybe they think of this chip in a different way, whereas before the chip was, well, I guess the chip didn't matter in the Intel days, really, unless you're looking for like a MacBook Pro or something like that. But before, it was like the products themselves were the important thing, and we're kind of thinking of M2 as an important product. But maybe it's like, here's our chip for the year. Like, we're just going to put in everything. So, like, we're not worried about what it goes into because it's going to go into everything. So, the products themselves, those are going to have other features that we can hype up. But the M2, it's our chip for the year. We're going to announce it now on its own. Like, just talk about the chip. Who cares what it goes in? Like, let's just talk about the chip. And then throughout the year, you're going to see this put into a bunch of our other products. I could see them marketing it that way.
I mean, less than a month to go now, so hopefully we know sooner than later. But that's the latest we know on the spring event.
The other one more thing to add there is, I mean, the other reason they may be doing this is because there's nothing else to talk about. They shift everything else out of this event pretty much. So maybe they are like, you know what, let's just talk about the M2 because maybe they have made some pretty impressive gains there, and then maybe they'll talk about Apple Card, maybe they'll talk about Apple TV, and then we'll call it a day.
As of right now, it's iPhone SE 3, small upgrade, iPad Air, small upgrade, Mac Mini, could be cool,
Could be cool. Yeah.
But is that enough to fill out an hour event? I mean, I guess they could stretch it, but there's really not a lot to talk about there. So I guess if there was a little M2 section, that would make sense, kind of buffer that out. And then here's the M2 chip. It's going to launch in sort of the Mac Mini and maybe that new Mac Pro today. And then you'll sort of just, when it comes to other products, it'll come to other products. They're not going to say when.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm hoping to be wrong and that we're gonna they're teasing us here that they're shifting everything downstream, but it's actually gonna come here. But if we know anything from the past, if the rumors say it's even possible it's gonna be delayed, it's probably gonna be delayed. So, hey, you made it to the end of this Apple Circle podcast clip, but there is a full episode. So if you want to listen to that, click the video over here. You can watch the entire thing. Or if you're someone who just wants to listen in your headphones, we have the audio version. Of course, links for that where you can subscribe and listen in your favorite audio podcast player is down below. And last but not least, the Apple Circle channel, where we have mini videos covering everything Apple, is also linked down below. So be sure to check that out and get subscribed.